Howdy y'all, welcome back to the channel. I'm James and this is Clearwater Fishing, and today we are going to be adjusting our manual jack plate to a prop to pad distance of 3.5 inches. So if that sounds any confusing to you, be sure you check out my previous video on how to measure your prop to pad distance. It's a pretty good video, thorough video. It shows you how to do that, but you definitely want to be doing that before you think about messing with your jack plate, because you want to know where you start. So before we get started on adjusting our manual jack plate, a couple things that you need to pay attention to the next time you get out on the water. I want to put these in the front of the video so you think about them when you go out next time. If you're raising your jack plate, so therefore making your prop to pad distance smaller, you need to pay attention to your water pressure while you're on plane. And check with your manufacturer's requirements of what the outboard takes. You just don't want to run this thing out of water and you don't want to burn it up. So that's very important that you pay attention to that. The second thing you may want to pay attention to is blowing out during turns or when you're trying to get up on pad. Both of those, as you raise your jack plate and make your prop to pad distance smaller, those become more likely. So just pay attention to it, and if it gets too annoying, you can always drop that distance just a little bit, and that will help out in those situations. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to show you guys exactly what I'm going to do, and then I'll have some video clips of me doing it, but I want to show you first in case you don't get a good view. So real quickly, I just want to go over the tools. First, you're going to need some kind of lubricant to lubricate your jack plate. That way it moves up and down a little easier. Second, you're going to want a permanent marker to mark your current location of your jack plate. You can always go back if you mark it. If you don't mark it, then you're going to have to depend on measuring your prop to pad distance again. But I'm going to mark mine and mark what the prop to pad was. That way I can always go back. Next, you're going to need a socket and a ratchet. I'm using 1/2-inch ratchet with 1/2-inch sockets. Now this first socket here I have is a large socket. It's actually the same exact socket for removing the prop, but this one is going to be used to adjust the jack plate up and down. So it's a pretty good size. And the next thing we're going to need is a socket for our bolts on the side of our jack plate and a wrench as well. This one is 3/4 and the other socket, these are both 3/4 and the other socket is 1 1/16, but that's going to vary to what kind of jack plate you have. The last thing you're going to need is a tape measure to measure your distance that you've moved. I'm going to be measuring it from the center line of my prop. That way I know that I'm actually moving the prop distance and not just the jack plate. So on my jack plate here, on the very front, I'm going to make a mark here. Oops. I'm going to make this mark pretty clear and easy to see. I'm actually going to make it pretty long. That way, in case it washes off, I can see quite a bit of it. So hopefully that covers it. And now I'm going to write what my distance is, and this is 4 3/32 inch. So I've marked a line on here so I can return back to my previous distance, and I also marked what my distance was for my prop to pad. All right, so I'm going to show you guys exactly what I'm going to be doing here. First of all, this bolt here is the bolt that I'll be adjusting to move the jack plate up. And then I have 4 bolts. One here, there's one below it, and then there's 2 on the other side that I'll be loosening so the jack plate will slide up and down. And then this area here is going to be the area that I lubricate. I'm going to do the exact same on both sides with the WD-40. That way it has an easier time of moving up and down. If I find that this is in a bind, I will do some other things with the trim and block of wood, but hopefully we don't have to do that. But if you find that your jack plate is in a bind or has been seized up quite a bit, you can put a 2x4 or 4x4 underneath the skeg of your outboard, and then use your trim as leverage to break this loose a little bit so it will actually move a little bit. So I'm just going to go ahead and lubricate both sides and then break these bolts loose, and then I will show you me adjusting the jack plate. I have all 4 bolts loose, and now I'm just going to be raising the outboard. I've already made sure it wasn't in a bind, so we're in good shape there. So now all there is to raise it about a half an inch. I'm going to make the prop distance exactly 14 inches from the ground. That way it is exactly 3 17/32 prop to pad. So we're just going to go raising this thing up. And if this starts to fill in a bind, that means there's something wrong with the jack plate and I need to break it loose again. So don't keep cranking on this. All this stuff is stainless. You do not want to break it. And I'll be stopping to check my measurements. That way I don't have to go back and start lowering it again. I don't recommend doing this part with an impact, mainly because, well, if you break something, it's a goner. So real quick, I had a little bit of a bind around the bolts. So all I did was took my little wrench here and actually just spun the bolts, and then actually broke loose my power pole a little bit. So my power pole is now really loose, so that's good. And I've already raised it. I don't know how well y'all can see it, but I've raised it this far. Probably my target distance already. It was in a bind until I messed with the power poles here. So we're going to do a quick leveling and measurement real quick, and well, we'll find out how close we are. All right, time to remeasure one more time. I've measured a few times off camera, and what I'm getting right here is 14 in about a 16th with his 2/32, which for my book is pretty daggum close, and I'm not going to be messing with a 32nd, so we're about to tighten her up. So missing it by a 32nd is pretty much dead on in my book. I'm going to snug some things up. I'm going to re-measure the prop to pad distance just to double check and make sure everything is exactly where I want it. It's really close to that 3.5 inch mark, I'm pretty sure. So I'm going to be snugging up those 4 bolts again, and then I'm going to remeasure my prop to pad. But overall, that is simply how you adjust your jack plate. I did find out the bolts were binding a little bit, so make sure your bolts do spin freely when you're adjusting your jack plate. And I did also have to use the 4x4 here underneath the skeg and use the trim just to get a little bind off of the jack plate. So use that as a helpful tip, especially for these heavier motors. So overall, pretty easy process. Hopefully you guys learned a few things about adjusting your manual jack plate. But just like always, until next time, get out there and go catch you some fish.